Hello, and you're listening to BMI Bicara Minggu Ini, and with me as your host, Norman Goh. I'm still trying to catch a breath since last night before following a non-stop updates on the political drama in Sabah. As expected, it looks like it will be a huge battle for power in Sabah, or will that be a catalyst for a snap election at the federal level? How will voters vote this time round in Sabah? And if a snap election is called, how will Pakatan Harapan wrest the power back? In this episode, I'm joined by Parti Keadilan Rakyat (PKR) or People's Justice Party Communications Director and Lembah Pantai Member of Parliament, YB Fahmi Fadzil. Welcome to the show, YB.
Hello, hi Norman.
So how's it been?
Oh, fun. Never a dull day.
So it has been 5 months since the change of power at the federal and also in Kedah, Melaka, Perak and Johor for Pakatan Harapan. How is Pakatan Harapan holding up so far?
I think it's been a very testing and trying time. The betrayals, the kind of pengkhianatan, the kind of people who have been leaving the parties, all, for PKR we saw, of course, top tier leaders leaving. For DAP, that for the longest time many have thought to be unsullied in terms of these political frogs also were affected, and even the seemingly diminutive Amanah suffered when their youth chief left. But I think worst of all we're seeing how all except 5 or 6 of Bersatu left Pakatan Harapan. So I think it's actually a very good time to consolidate and try to reconfigure the parties, clean up the parties, reform the parties, but also I think to both re-strategize, reorient and find back our base. I think the 22 months that we were in power, that we were in Putrajaya, many felt that we had lost touch with the base, with our grassroots. Maybe not all of us, but maybe some of us. And this is a very important time actually for us to really find back our feet.
I remember for the past 10 by-elections, both state as well as parliamentary. So it's a 5-5. 5 for Pakatan Harapan, 5 for the other side, for Perikatan Nasional Muafakat at that time. And I remember you mentioned about the ground's sentiment saying that Pakatan Harapan is perceived as 22 months feeling dissociated and not listening to the ground. So what and the other side was saying that it's proven because look at the results in Tanjung PI in Semenyih. Question is it really truly reflective of what the voters are saying?
I think it was about storytelling. A lot of us were so busy governing, learning the ropes of being part of the executive, many of us for the first time, that we lost an essential component of actually governance, which is communication. And there were multiple reasons for that. Some people say that it's because of so-called fifth columnists, agents, saboteurs, or provocateurs, depending on how you want to see it, or what some label as the so-called deep state. Be that as it may, I think some of the successes of Pakatan Harapan were not communicated well enough. We didn't hear enough about some of these things. For example, things we take for granted. Every time a festive season comes round, previously you'd always hear about people complaining on the rising price of goods. During Pakatan Harapan's administration, that rarely happened. But more than that, I think there was a sense of, maybe for some leaders, they may have felt that we have a lot of time to do what we need to do, rather than we need to do these things now.
It's like taking things for granted over this course of things. I think to point, like what we have mentioned, the cost of the CPI, for example, previously in the Barisan Nasional ruling, it was hovering between 3 to 4%. And when Pakatan Harapan came to power in 2018, it was just 1% and below. It was very well controlled and taking a affirmative action and making sure these prices won't go up. And unfortunately, just I think yesterday, the targeted petrol subsidy has been scrapped. So we move forward, looking into PKR itself. So much have been said about who done it, who was at fault, what led to the change of hands at the helm of power, the betrayal, and all sorts. And someone who came up with the scheme of things. How is PKR holding up? What impact has it affected the party itself? So I mentioned people has been unmasked and also whitening of the party. What it is right now? What is happening in PKR?
We're undergoing a process of reform, internal reform, and what this means is, of course, we've taken action, disciplinary action against some more than 400 people. 400 members have been expelled or have been suspended, and certain divisions saw some exodus, maybe not as many as some would have hoped. Some meaning those who betrayed the cause and the movement and the party. I think they were hoping that larger groups of people would have left, but that didn't materialize. And what we're seeing actually is a reformation of the party itself at the grassroots level. So on a very practical level, those who I think were sidelined when certain groups that we refer to as the cartel, those who were aligned with politically with Azmin Ali, when they were in charge of those divisions, they cast aside anyone who didn't agree with Azmin so those who were cast out now are back in the fold. So they have been given more room to play. At the same time, those who people suspect as being sleeper cells, those who are aligned to Azmin but have not left the party for various reasons, it could be said that we are paying attention to who these people are, but at the same time there needs to be a process of rehabilitation for these members so that they can be accepted back in the fold. Having said that, the reminder to the party is to go back to our core struggle, which is at the heart of it, understanding and focusing on the plight of the people. So even in our meetings as members of parliament, the opposition leader or also party president Anwar Ibrahim reminded all the MPs that we have to focus on policies, which is why PKR took the initiative to name certain MPs into certain positions, spokespersons, so that in terms of our work in Parliament, we become more focused in these certain subject matters and certain areas.
I'm sorry, I might just have to cut you on that. When it comes to the shadow cabinet, it is lauded that PKR actually made the first move to come out with the spokesperson as a shadow cabinet. But why not a shadow cabinet represented by all the coalition parties from Pakatan Harapan?
Because this naming of the spokespersons is really has to be seen as being part of the reconfiguration or the reforms in the party. So we are doing multiple things, including cleaning up the party, giving tasks for our MPs, making sure that we stay focused on issues. So it's not about building a shadow cabinet or that's why the so-called positions are not ministerial but rather they're thematic. So for me, I'm looking after communications, arts and culture, whereas in actual fact those are two different ministries. But because as before becoming an MP and even as when I was just a normal party functionary, I was focused on communication, so it was natural. But my background in the arts, so they decided to ask me to look into this. So how this is actually, most MPs can, even though they are given tasks to speak on certain subject matter, they don't have to. speak on that. But when it comes to say budget, and you want to focus on certain ministries, it helps for the MPs to be more focused in that way. And at the Pakatan Harapan level, the respective spokespersons from other parties, the names have been given. So I think soon PH will be announcing, I wouldn't say a shadow cabinet, but I think these groupings of MPs who will be focusing on these certain themes, subjects.
It's also quite similar to before GE14. That was how it was done before. But let's look at the elephant in the room, the bigger picture for Pakatan Harapan itself. Is the current model still workable for the coalition of PKR, DAP and Amanah to work, or even a Pakatan Harapan Plus? If yes, why? If not, how will the bloc move ahead in anticipation of a possible snap election end of this year? We're looking at possible October.
So I think this is a very good question that many say because of the string of by-election losses, beginning from Cameron Highlands all the way through to the most recent one is Chini. So some people feel that perhaps, and also after the Sheraton move and the collapse of the Pakatan Harapan government, whether Pakatan Harapan as a brand is still strong. So there are questions within Pakatan Harapan, within PKR, asking, should we not look at rebranding Pakatan Harapan? Should we not look at addressing these fundamental perception issues, optics about Pakatan Harapan? Given that one of the big grouses that people had about Pakatan Harapan was communication, and also some of the so-called difficult political position that Tun Mahathir as Prime Minister took. There was a lot of people saying that he says Malays are lazy, these kind of comments which people feel maybe is not so helpful. So I think Pakatan Harapan as a brand may need to be maybe undergo some kind of rebranding. Whether we have enough time for that or not, that's one thing. But if you look at DAP, for example, in Sabah and Sarawak, what you see is they oftentimes contest in the elections using their own flag. So I think this question of Pakatan Harapan logo, probably Sabah Sarawak, at least for DAP they allow autonomy. So there's some question as to using Pakatan Harapan logo there as well.
I think for that part, I will also touch about Sabah and Sarawak. And at the national level, is there a growing distrust between party leaders within Pakatan Harapan? How will Pakatan work with the current block of 3 plus Warisan and ex-Bersatu leaders led by Tun Dr. Mahathir?
I think if elections were to be called this year or any time within the next 6 months, for example, of course the thing that there will be some reset. We don't know, for example, whether Tun Mahathir will be at the starting blocks for that race. We don't know a number of things, whether certain people will be contesting or not. Maybe some of the, of course, for example, our contenders in Gombak and Ampang will be totally different.
And you never know. Tun may not want to contest anymore.
Or maybe Tun might want to contest again. So it's still up in the air.
So it's just too many permutations. Or what would be the clearer path forward?
I think for PKR it's quite clear. We are set on Anwar Ibrahim as PM candidate. For Pakatan Harapan it's quite clear. If we were to see dissolution of parliament within the next 6 months, 9 months, anytime before 2023, Pakatan Harapan sees Anwar Ibrahim as the PM candidate. You might ask, then what of this kind of dalliance with Shafi Abdal, for example? I think I wouldn't necessarily call it a backup plan, but in terms of returning the people's mandate and reclaiming government before GE15, there are essentially several pathways that people see as being possible. One is Dato' Sri Anwar as Prime Minister candidate. The other is Dato' Sri Shafi'i as Prime Minister candidate. And therein, this is before going into elections. Therein, the situation is depends on who can get the numbers. You may say, if you look at it, mata kasar, if you just look at it generally, you could say that in the opposition there's 109 MPs, and in the government 113. 113 for how long we don't know, right? And why does it seem so difficult to get another 3 or 4? Actually, it's not another 3 or 4. I think if we only manage to secure 113, 114, the same thing may happen to at the federal level as what happened at the state level. Yeah, and I think the main, if you were to look at Sabah, the main mistake that Musa Aman made is trying to go to the governor with only a majority of 1. And so you can see that that majority of 1, whether at the state level or federal level, is very untenable. So at least in terms of where PKR stands, where PH stands, if we were to go into elections, the PM candidate would be Anwar Ibrahim. In terms of reclaiming government now, the first choice is Anwar Ibrahim. And should that not materialize for whatever reason, then the so-called backup candidate would be Shafi'i Abdal. And I think what's important is not having a very slim majority. We have to, I reckon, cross 120.
At least a 120. I mean, previously it was 129. And we look at the number of seats in West Malaysia, it's about 165. And it's not easy to counter that. Also, there's another perspective of whether Shafi'i Abdal is he a tenable candidate to garner that support from West Malaysia. But from your point of view and observations as a communications director in PKR, earlier on you did mention about how Sheraton move has affected the image of Pakatan Harapan as a whole. But over the past 5 months, you did mention about the work within PKR to regain the public trust. And interestingly, across, along the lines, we're also seeing the resurgence of young activists and leaders in the political scene demanding for better representation of youth, anak muda in the parliament and state assemblies. So how is Pakatan Harapan and PKR towards the youth today? What is the perception of the youth towards PKR and Pakatan Harapan? Is it still relevant?
Yeah, I think it's this is a very important segment of society. Given that many of them by July 2021 will be able to cast their votes, but not only for that reason, but demographically, you are seeing an entirely new generation of Malaysians who may not have the same political memory as those who are in their 40s, 50s, and onwards.
And they are born in 1999.
Yeah.
These are the group of people in 1999.
Yeah, they were born after Reformasi.
Exactly.
So the post-Reformasi era, so to speak, they would have experienced a number of quite tumultuous periods in their youth in terms of what was happening globally. You've got, for example, September 11 and that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the financial crisis of 2008, and then of course what's going on right now. So as they come of age today, given the plethora of social media platform avenues for them to voice out, perhaps we're seeing a new generation that is beginning to find its so-called footing, or getting a sense of its own agency, its ability to do things, to have its voice not only be heard but be counted. and this is a powerful feeling. So for PKR, I think we have at every so-called generation of leaders, we've got some very young MPs like a new entrant, P. Prabhakaran, the MP for Batu, the accidental MP. You've also got some old-timers, of course, like Anwar Ibrahim. He's possibly the oldest PKR MP. But we've also got...
And he's not 95, right?
No, he's not 95. Yeah, he's 74. So we've got in practically every age group, every age bracket. And what's good is, at least in terms of engagement of the digital parliamentarians, they seem to be quite interested in what some of us have to say from Pakatan Harapan, from PKR. So much so that they got a lot of flack. People who are saying that maybe they're too pro Pakatan Harapan. That's not necessarily the case.
I think to a point, even one of them was even being asked, is Parliament Digital funded by Pakatan Harapan or Tun Mahathir? To a point of that sort of perception have been played. What if a young person who actually asked you, said, PKR is so messy? Of course, one of the usual answers I get was, democracy is noisy. I'll say it is not new with the trials and tribulations. I will come to that, towards the end of this interview with you. But moving from youth, right? Let's look at Perikatan itself. The loosely formed Perikatan National Government, or maybe soon to be a Mufakat Nasional as Bersatu, wants to join and form partnership together with PAS and UMNO in the bloc. How will this entail? Will this actually work? What happens to the other partners like GPS and other BN component parties like MCA and MIC? This really changes the whole makeup of multiracial, multi-religious background into a more Malay, Muslim-led government. How will this affect the Malaysians as a whole?
Yeah, I think the so-called mythology of Perikatan Nasional is like that W.B. Yeats poem, things fall apart, the center cannot hold. So it's quickly becoming a sandcastle that the sea is sweeping aside, and this is where we really see how the Sheraton move was an endgame in and of itself, and those who were part of that ploy did not see much further than that. Yeah, we don't know what their policy stand is. We are seeing some really rather embarrassing exchanges in Parliament, where you've got the Minister of Local Government saying that she wants to push for local government elections, only to be basically publicly I would say rebuked by senior backbench government backbench members.
Not just rebuked and humiliated too.
Basically humiliated, and saying that if that they don't want this is not part of their manifesto. So what is part of their manifesto? They have no manifesto. They have no plan.
And they don't have any direction to begin with.
It's and in fact, evidently the Perikatan has fallen apart. The center cannot hold. And today, for example, I think the most startling announcement saying that UMNO will not join Perikatan, but Bersatu is free to join Muafakat Nasional. I think that is the clearest indicator that the eulogy for Perikatan has to be, the obituary for Perikatan has to be put out today.
So it's like majlis tahliah sebelum sambutan Adik Al-Had tomorrow lah.
Yeah, so people are saying that before Hari Raya Korban ada yang dah terkorban.
Dah ditalkinkan
dan ada yang terkorban.
Astaghfirullah. Yeah. I never expect that I will mengucap in this podcast. But it's interesting in how the dynamics within and this form or formless coalition between them. But we look at what happened today, where Datuk Sri Shafi Abdul, the incumbent chief minister, managed to pull that string and dissolve the state assembly. And Sabah state election will be held within 60 days, and its dissolution on July 30th, which is today. It must be called latest in September, after Malaysia Day, possibly. But PKR is now left with only one state legislator, Yang Amat Berhormat, the Deputy Chief Minister, Christina Liu, and the one who was sacked today, I think was Kenny, right? Were you Kenny? Do you think Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin will decide to call for a snap election together with Sabah's election?
I think if he were to do that, then his party would would collapse.
Decimated, to say.
I think his party would collapse, would be decimated, would be obliterated, would be without many seats. They are in a very, very weak bargaining position. They have to negotiate in amidst basically where you know the atmosphere, the climate is absolutely unfriendly to them, and you see how even within Muafakat Nasional, between UMNO and PAS, if you were to look at say Terengganu or Kelantan, even there where you expect seat negotiations to be smooth sailing, straightforward, you hear statements from UMNO saying that they will contest all parliamentary and state seats.
And we know that in both Kelantan and Terengganu it's controlled by PAS, and PAS is very strong over the East Coast.
I don't think in that light, I don't think Muhyiddin would call for elections. We want him to call now because for Pakatan Harapan, for PKR, in terms of seat negotiations, in terms of the principles around, it's quite straightforward for us, definitely in Semenanjung and also Sabah and Sarawak. So it is to our advantage, in fact, to call for elections now. For UMNO, the only party in Muafakat and Perikatan previously, they were so gung-ho because for them, one, they want to be in a position of power. If they were to join Muafakat Nasional, if Bersatu were to join, then they would not be in full control of the political narrative, one. Two, negotiating seats will be very difficult. But also for UMNO to call for elections now means that those leaders who are in the dock, so long as they're not convicted, they can still contest. So Najib, for example, has been convicted, so he can't contest until his appeal is dispensed with in full. So that may take another year and a half. So now they are less one. So the worry for UMNO is that the longer they wait, the more the judgments come, and if they are found guilty, then they will not be able to contest in the elections. So they want it to be done now, really for their own selfish reasons, personal reasons.
Which because we are seeing a string of their senior leaders, because within UMNO itself, it has its own factions. We have the Zahid faction, the Warlords group, the older group. Then you have Mat Hassan's side, and you have Kuli's side. Mat Hassan is together with KJ. So within UMNO, it has at least 3 different factions. And looking at this very interesting situation in Sabah itself, can I safely say that Pakatan Harapan is ready to go on the ground to contest even if there's a snap election?
Yeah. Pakatan Harapan is a partner with Warisan in Sabah. So the primary political player is Warisan, of course, if you wanted to look at it. We are an important part of that picture. Definitely they're ready. I spoke with Christina today before before and after the announcement of dissolution. They have had several meetings, so I think in terms of seats, Sabah originally was supposed to have 72 seats.
Yep.
But currently they have 60 seats in play, and Sabah is unique because whoever forms government technically can have an additional 5 MPs because of the appointments that they can make.
Yeah. Because it was passed in July 2019, the Parliament unanimously passed Sabah's redelineation to increase the number of seats, state seats, from 60 to 73. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's no addition to parliamentary seats, right?
No.
Yeah. So on that, moving from Sabah, let's move to Sarawak. Sarawak State Assembly was initially touted to be held sometime early this year before the movement controller (MCO) was put in place to control the COVID-19 pandemic. So I spoke to some of my sources. GPS is considering holding the state election at the same time, should a snap election to be called, breaking the 40-year convention of holding a separate state election since 1979. That's 40 years. The last one was held in 1974. Currently, PKR has no more state legislators left in the state, but with the exception of 2 MPs. What is the next game plan for PKR working with DAP and Amanah?
Yeah.
Are you guys working together, PSB, in facing GPS?
I think for PKR, the first order of the day or first order of business really is about reforming the party in Sarawak. And this involves a lot of legwork. Even though we would like to contest, in I think the last state elections, I think we contested more than 40 seats, or around 40 seats.
And that 40 seats are mostly rural. Those are really tough seats.
Yes. So whether we will be contesting all those number of seats, I haven't gotten the latest figures. But of course, the priority for us would be the seats that we won in the last state elections. At the same time, in terms of Pakatan Harapan, along with PSB, in facing off with the GPS, if there were to be a reconfiguration of politics at a federal level, then even going into the state elections, there will have to be some kind of reorientation and reconfiguration. So what this means is we definitely, at least for PKR, we will be focusing more on the seats that we won. We have heard that DAP in Sarawak has seen some difficulty. There, Adon for Padungan,
Who's also the deputy chief of DAP in Sarawak,
yes,
has
the
left.
vice chief for DAP Sarawak has stepped down, and I think this was a personal, perhaps a protest signal. But I wouldn't wade into this matter. As far as PKR is concerned, at the very least, our baseline is the seats that we won, we will contest again. And the seats that we lost, I think that's really where a lot of discussion will happen. Whether it involves PSB or with other Pakatan Harapan parties, it's really up to the state leaders to make
decide
that call. Yeah.
Because previously, let me bring back some of the few things. DAP has 6 seats in a state election back in 2016, and PKR maintained no addition, no loss, getting 3 seats, one in Baclalan, one in Korean, and the other one in Batu Lintang. So we'll be expecting PKR to field candidates in those 3 areas. However, one issue, one very glaring situation that we face, not we actually, it should be Pakatan Harapan at that time. DAP and PKR clash in 6 seats, and we know what happened. Someone signed that Watikah Pelantikan, and that caused that friction between the 2 parties.
Yeah.
In general, maybe we don't go too much into details, but has a seat this discussion is it done?
Yeah, it's ongoing. It's ongoing. I don't think we will face the same problems as before, because the people who are behind it are all Azmin or linked to Azmin.
And
So so they've all been given the boot, or they've all left the party. So thank God for that.
How has it affected the all the long years of the work, especially in the rural areas in Sarawak? How has it been for what is PKR's plan to restructure itself and gain footing further in Sarawak?
I think a lot of it is building from the ground up. the current state chief, Larry Seng. I think he has quite a lot of work ahead of him, and it's important, at least at the central level, that we provide him as much support he needs. He's no greenhorn in politics. He's been a deputy. He's been an assistant minister before. So I think at least in terms of some of the experience he has on the ground, that is quite helpful. I think the main concern for us is what should we prioritize? To me, what's most important is making sure that the problems we faced, whether it's 2016, 2011, even before then, do not recur. And a lot of this has to do with reminding our local leaders, our state leaders, our grassroots leaders about the reason for PKR to be the raison d'être, and this is very important. This is a theme that Dato' Sri Anwar raises every time we go to we do our state visits, and one of the things that he reminds is to go back to the root, go back to the so-called source of our the wellspring of our struggle, which is always reminding ourselves what do the people want, what is it that we have to fight for them, for the rakyat. So this is something which I think in Sarawak we have to double down on. It'll take a little bit of time. I believe that Larry has been doing some good work, the reports that we've been getting, and also independently. I think we should be shaping up for state elections, and we're expecting it sometime in September, October.
September is also the Bersatu's party election at that time, and end of this year is also DAP's party election too. So I've seen some unpublished surveys on both Perikatan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan. I'm not so sure you have seen. It was last in May, but the numbers did not look really good on Pakatan Harapan. There was a lot of support for Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin, just him. But with so little time, how will PKR prevail from all this mess in Malaysian politics?
I think the personal popularity of Tan Sri Muhyiddin may not extend too far. I think the fact that he has not appeared in a press conference since maybe mid-March, before the MCO began.
Just right before the MCO, you're right.
I think it may have been March 16th. It was a Majlis Tindakan Ekonomi Negara. I think that might have been the last time he fielded questions. So this air of supposed impenetrability, and this, it is only as good as the so-called, I'll give an example. When the speeches, almost every speech that is given has been recorded. He's not really done many things live. And I have seen some candid photos of him where he looks very tired, where he looks, I wouldn't say unkempt, but actually even one of the latest missives he gave, he seemed to look a little, of course, unwell, a little bit unkempt, in fact. So how long he can maintain this image and ride to some extent on the coattails of Director General Nur Hisham, the success of MOH in handling COVID-19, we really have to salute them. It's really their work. Actually, if Nur Hisham were to contest, I think he would be very popular himself.
And then because COVID-19 is just trying to control the infection and the pandemic itself, the real impact of the economy itself and recession has yet to be seen.
Yeah.
So the real test to Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin is yet to be seen, actually.
Yep, that's right. Actually, we're most worried about the economy. We are worried about second wave of COVID-19, but the impact of the economy on livelihood, on pay, jobs, and of course, we have now seen the extension of the moratorium for an additional 3 months. Not as extensive as we had hoped it will be. That may help stave off some of the impact of economic slowdown. But fundamentally, when Malaysia is a trading nation, if it's difficult for us to take our exports when other countries are suffering and not buying in the quantities and volume that we need them to, I think we will face some strong headwinds. Yeah, and to rely purely on domestic consumption, given the challenges facing certain sectors, alongside the recent announcement of cutbacks on and halting of use of foreign labor, or limiting it only to 3 sectors, I think this will have some impact on these other sectors or industries going
Particularly on service sector, I think they rely a lot on foreign labor as
forward.
well.
Also glove makers.
Yep, it's
Glove
true.
makers and
And we are projecting about 7-8% of unemployment that may actually balloon up to 1.2 million unemployed Malaysians.
yeah. So when that happens, you see, because the unemployment numbers are 2 months late, so you don't know it until you're deep in it. You'll start to see some signs. You'll start to figure out. I know anecdotally, my brother's friends who have lost jobs, right? I know people who've lost jobs. You lost your job, but thankfully you've regained.
Yeah, I lost my job, but in the midst of time, I was doing freelance. But I contribute to the statistics as well.
Yes. so this is quite worrying, and actually the statistics they may not show the true picture of
Yeah,
what's
they may not
going
reveal
on.
the true
Extent.
the extent and the impact itself. For example, the moratorium that you mentioned earlier, yes, it helps out those who are unemployed, but how about those who are M40s and they are paying? They too will suffer from limited liquid cash to spend or even to survive for the next couple of months. This we will see, because at the end of the day, even Tan Sri Muhyiddin's budget may not be passed at the end of the year. It might be
we
that's the
might not
test.
even get that far. In Parliament over the next 2 weeks. We will be seeing some pretty precarious bills in terms of support.
Such as
Precarious support for certain bills. So right now we are debating the motion of thanks for the King's speech. Starting from the second week of August, we will have the first of 2 supplementary bills. These are money bills, supply bills. The first one is a supplementary bill for money that has been spent in 2019, including for COVID-19. But essentially it was from the Pakatan Harapan administration. And the second bill is on supplementary bill to reallocate funds for new ministries that were established after the new government was formed. So we've seen and heard from UMNO that even though publicly right now what they're saying is they will support Perikatan, they will support Muhyiddin Yassin, but UMNO, I think they want to be in control. So I suspect if Muhyiddin is unable to provide all the concessions that they demand of him, then we don't know whether this administration may even be able to pass any of the other bills. And should they lose a money bill, a supply bill, the supplementary bill, technically the government collapses.
Oh, really?
Because they don't have funds. They are spending money without approval.
Would they actually, that will how would it be done? Because, when you say that supplementary bill is not passed, how would that actually pave to a possible dissolution of the parliament as well?
Yeah, so essentially you would take that as a indirect vote of no confidence. And what would happen is at that time, for example, he could dissolve parliament. He could, advise the king to dissolve parliament. He could actually make way for another person from within Perikatan Nasional, which was what happened in the UK during World War II, when Neville Chamberlain gave way to Winston Churchill.
The return of Winston Churchill.
Yes, and the first time he became Prime Minister at that time, when World War II was at its height. So you may see something like that happen. For example, maybe at that time, perhaps someone like Azmin or Hishamuddin Hussein may try to jostle to rise up and be a PM of Perikatan Nasional government. I mean, that's not entirely to be discounted, but it could also mean another kind of political reconfiguration. So the next couple of weeks are going to be too exciting.
I think too exciting to a point where a lot of people they can't follow what's going on. To sum all this up, I was the first thing when I called you out and said, I need to talk to you. What's going on with PKR. PKR has been, going through a lot. Looking forward, PKR has been through the mud, in the police. You've been intimidated, much thick and thin in the Malaysian politics. I gotta give the credit. Without PKR, there won't be a reformasi in 1998. We might not be able to see the historic election in 2018, if not because of the reformasi time. What is the future of PKR and its political environment in Malaysia? How will the party itself bring about the change for Malaysians?
I became attracted to PKR, of course, initially as a younger, as a young Malaysian, through the street protests of Reformasi. At that time, I had been through 17 years of 18 years of Dr. Mahathir as a Prime Minister, and to see Anwar Ibrahim being treated that way, to see others being treated that way, beaten up, arrested, sent to prison, shook me, to the core. So I became enamored with this movement, and started helping out in elections. I became an activist, at that time, volunteer, subsequently an activist. To me, a party like PKR is from the get-go multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-religious, very open to the idea of Bangsa Malaysia without having to say that it's open to Bangsa Malaysia. And to me, this is a party of the future. To me, this is what Malaysia, this is a party that has 222 divisions throughout every parliamentary constituency, and we have now 1 million members, which is an exceptional progress. At one point, we had MPs and ADONs in every state, right? And I think we still do right now. So, to me, this is the future of the country. A party like this. But at the same time, I worry about democracy. I worry about the ideas that people have, or people may not know what democracy is.
Even disenfranchisement, because people feel like going to polls is a ceremonial role, while people, when elected representatives, can be bought over.
Yeah. And this is where going back to the core of the struggle is a necessary component to the reform of PKR and Pakatan Harapan. That's why we can't lie to ourselves and say the image of Pakatan Harapan is unbattered. You can't. You have to accept that in the 22 months the image deteriorated. And if you ask me, a state like Selangor, people recognize the PKR logo more than they do the Pakatan Harapan logo, because I think PKR leads in Selangor, and it's well known, and I think at the same time, in terms of where the country is headed, I mentioned democracy. I mentioned we spoke about young people. I think it's very important that we work really hard and work really fast on civic engagement and education. I think democracy is something which not only do we have to learn more about, educate ourselves more about, also acclimatize ourselves too. The fear is that not only are elections ceremonial, but democracy is once every 5 years, whereas actually democracy is something which, there are people who believe in participatory democracy or deliberative democracy, or some people feel that maybe we should look at representational or representative democracy or republican democracy. Whichever way, it's important that we have a new cohort, a new batch of young Malaysians who are engaged, who are interested, who are able to articulate in their own vernacular for a new generation of Malaysians why it's important to be part of politics. You don't have to be a politician, you don't have to be a member of parliament to be political. And I think this is the biggest misconception, that politics is only partisan politics, whereas actually officers have politics, mosques and churches have politics. You have politics at the dinner table. So
even in the family.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So it's important that we understand the function of politics, the virtues of democracy,
and the principles itself it holds, where when you mention that democracy does not only occur once in every 5 years, because every single time, if you are as a voter, you take part, any voter or any citizens have a right to question the MPs, question the policies of the government, and even criticize them. And that's how participatory democracy works. And yes, I mean, that really sums up very well on how PKR together Pakatan Harapan, and despite your hectic schedule, you always make some of your time to speak to the press, and that I thank you so much, YB Fahmi Fadzil. With with so many uncertainties and political changes, I think I'm about to lose track of what's going on. So I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you and everyone a Selamat Hari Raya Aidiladha. And you're listening to Bicara Minggu Ini, uncovering current affairs and politics, and you can listen to the stories and interviews on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts on iTunes. For more updates and stories, if you have any suggestions, you can tweet to me on Twitter at I'mNonGo, or you can also tweet to YB Fahmi Fadzil at
Fahmi_Fadzil on Twitter.
You can find him on Gold dan Kinju. That was way back time ago. Alright, thank you so much. And have a great weekend.
Thank you.
We don't know what will happen next week, right? Lots of drama, but
Excite.
maybe another round of House of Cards, right? Alright, thank you.